Thank you very much for joining us this evening to our latest Newcastle Develop series, where we're going to be talking about flexible working. It's great to have you join us and for your company tonight. I'm joined by a panel of alumni, and it's fantastic to have their company too, because we'll be discussing flexible working, what it means to them, what it means to individuals and as employees and organisations. My name's Lucy Pritchard. I'm the Alumni Relations Manager for Newcastle University, and I'm the host for this evening's event. Before we introduce our panel, just to let you know that this is a webinar which is being recorded, and it will be made available to watch later on Newcastle's Alumni YouTube channel. So if you need to dip out or anything like that, you will be able to pick back up later. And as it's a webinar, you can just sit back and relax because your cameras and your microphones have been turned off. But we would love to hear from you during tonight's event. So please do, if there is a poll that pops up on your screen, do take part in the poll. And also, if you have any questions, on the bottom of your screen, the Zoom screen, there should be an option in the menu for Q&A, which has a double bubble, speech bubble. So please pop any questions for the panel in there. And also, if you have any thoughts or comments, we'd love to hear from them as well. So please pop them into the chat, which is in the same menu, but this option only has one speech bubble. So do please, any thoughts, comments, or anything like that, do please put them in there. So thank you very much again for joining us. It is probably a very pertinent subject, particularly with the news that's being announced in the UK at the moment, with people having to potentially have to work from home. So without further ado, can we just have a check of the chat function? Are you able to, or please can you tell us where you're watching the webinar by clicking on the chat button in your menu and just typing where you're watching the webinar? I'll give you a couple of minutes just to do that. Just let us know where you are in the world. Thank you, Paul. It's nice to have you join us from York. And Jack in Gosford, lovely to have you. Hi, Rebecca in Durham. Oh, Josh in Manchester, great to see you. And Claire in Newcastle. Oh, Catherine, lovely to have you from the Netherlands. Thank you very much. And Beth in Wide Open. It's great to see everyone. We've got Jamie from Leeds and Laura in Whitley Bay. And Sue, you're in Lowfell. Nice to have you here on the panel, Sue. Well, thank you very much. It's good that the chat's working. And like I say, at any point you have any comments or any thoughts, or you want to share your experience about flexible working with the panel, please do pop it in the chat. We have my colleague Danica, who's our events officer, who's keeping an eye on those things and keeping me right as well. But if you have any questions specifically for the panel, please do pop them in the Q&A box in that menu, because that means that we can specifically see it and I can make sure that I ask the panel the questions. Thank you. So we won't wait any further. If I could ask the panel to introduce themselves, and Lisa, we're going to start with you.
Thank you, Lucy. Good evening, everybody. I am Lisa Eaton. I'm founder and managing director of Unwritten Group, which is a marketing and communications agency, and also Fabric Academy, which is a marketing training academy. I have worked in the creative sector for the best part of 20 years, and it has been always predominantly quite a traditional industry in the sense that it has been 9 to 5, always office-based for me, and always Monday to Friday, essentially, and some on top of kind of traditional working hours. So when I set up Unwritten Group, which is almost 8 years ago now, it was very much to try and break the mold and move away from those traditional working practices where it was so rigid that it couldn't fit around parents who had young children, or people or talent that you wanted to attract who weren't necessarily geographically based close to where your office was. And also just give people the opportunity to be able to work from anywhere in the world and still have a really successful career. So over the last 12 months, we've worked really hard as a business to push those boundaries even further. being pushed into remote working was a bit of a shock to our system. But we've returned to the office now, or the creative studio, in a hybrid model with a much more flexible working structure than we've ever seen before. And having evaluated that over the last 6-month flow through with our team, it's been a really successful step forward for us. So for me, flexible working is exactly that, giving you the opportunity to do the job that you love from anywhere in the world, but very much balance that with home life, your professional goals and objectives, as well as your personal goals and objectives. So hopefully that gives you a quick overview. Matthew?
Hello. Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Wharton, Law LLB 2013. I currently work as a portfolio manager at a wealth management company called Bruin Dolphin. We're based in the centre of town. But between myself and my team, we're responsible for managing around about £2.5 billion worth of client assets in Newcastle. And to build on Lisa's point about traditional working environments, I guess finance is probably the textbook. Everybody at the computers, from before markets open at 8 in the morning till after markets close at 4:30 in the afternoon, and that was the day job up until 23rd of March 2020. Bruin as a company have been very forward thinking with regards to hybrid working and flexible working. For the years leading up to 2020, we'd transitioned all of our tech away from towers to laptops and cloud-based systems in order to better empower the business development arm of our business to go out and see clients and win new business, but also to help prepare for an event such as COVID. And really, we're trying now to embrace the flexibility that offers. My personal view and the perspective that we sort of ingrain in the culture of our team is that what is important is the output that you bring to the team, not where you do it or indeed how you do it. If you cannot trust the people that you employ to do the job that you're employing them to do, why are you employing them in the first place, right? So it's about trust and empowerment from our perspective. I'm sure we'll get on to the finer nuances of that trust and that empowerment later in the discussion. But that's certainly the approach that we've been taking and seems to be bearing fruit in terms of how people are making use of hybrid working in Newcastle.
Thank you, Matthew. We definitely will be discussing that in more detail, I think, as the event goes on. But Bill, if I could ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. Good evening, everybody. It's really nice to be here tonight. My name is Bill Paris, and I'm the Director of Employee Engagement Solutions at Motivate. Motivate's a young international technology services business with less than 20 people of mixed skills and disciplines, from consultants to creative designers to psychologists to technical specialists. We currently have got office locations in Madrid in Spain and Newcastle here in the Northeast. And what we do is design, develop and manage digital solutions that engage people. So our solutions turn passive individuals into active participants by increasing the motivation, participation and commitment, resulting in greater levels of engagement and performance. I've had quite a varied career since graduating, and I've worked in a range of environments, from large established corporations to small startup businesses, and each have their nuances. My careers ranged from working in management roles in factories before transitioning into the human resources profession in large corporates. I then moved into the recruitment industry and spent a number of years specialising in senior level appointments in human resources prior to joining Motivate in 2016. So because of that, I've worked in a whole range of environments where work was rigidly organised because it had to be, highly defined shift patterns and strict operational processes that had to be adhered to in manufacturing environments, to an office-based role Monday to Friday, 9 till 5:30 with no working from home, to a scenario where I spent 3 days a week in the office and worked from home 2 days, now referred to as hybrid. And now I spend around 90% of my time working remotely from home in the southeast of the country and go to other offices when I need to be there. So what does flexibility at work mean to me? I think flexibility is allowing people some degree of responsibility for deciding how, where, and when they work. It was always said that we go to work, implying it was a physical place we had to go to, but that's really changed. However, even before the pandemic, there were people who worked remotely, some or even all of the time. As I said earlier, every business is different. And here at Motivate, pre-pandemic, our approach was to have people work in the office, but with informal flexibility to work from home on occasion when agreed with a manager, if they felt it would be more productive or if they had urgent domestic responsibilities they needed to take care of. But being a small business, there needs to be a lot of interaction between individuals and teams in our type of organisation. And we felt this worked well for us and created a positive environment that really encouraged creativity, teamwork and collaboration. And this seemed to work for our people also. But during lockdown and with everyone working from home, we still functioned as a business, but I think we lost some of that cohesiveness, creativity and energy that we had previously. I think those spontaneous coffee machine moments when someone says something of interest that sparks a raft of discussion, debate, problem solving can be so useful. Even bumping into other businesses or potential prospects can't be done so easily when working from home. And although we tried to substitute the social elements of being in the office with various virtual get-togethers, it wasn't quite the same. But moving forward, we've kept the approach that we had before, although we have rehired someone who moved to another country and they work completely remotely from there, but with some time spent in our main offices when required, a bit like me. But we're conscious that the world has changed and that our approach to flexible working may need to be reviewed, or else we run the risk of not being able to hire the talent we want if flexibility is a major decision point for people deciding to join us. And likewise, like other companies, we may run the risk of losing our people for similar reasons. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Will. You've touched on a number of points there that I definitely know that we will be discussing very shortly, particularly around the future of flexible working and what that means and in recruitment and things like that. So thank you. And Sue, no means last but least, no means but last but not least, should I say, please could you introduce yourself?
Thanks very much for inviting me to speak tonight, and I am looking forward to the discussion, certainly. So I work for an organisation called Nigel Wright. We're the largest professional services recruitment firm in the north, and I've specialised in HR recruitment for pretty much my whole career there, so since 2004. So I guess what I would like to do today is to be able to give a bit of an insight as to what we're seeing in the market for both our clients and what their expectations are and how things might have changed from their perspective, but also what our candidates are asking for, because flexible working is definitely the number one thing that people are asking for when they're moving roles at the moment, and actually we're tending to negotiate on that quite a bit instead of salary. So it's interesting to see how that's affected people's motivations to move roles. I guess from my perspective, what flexible working means for me, and again, coming from a traditional industry like recruitment, that would have been very much about quite long hours, working from 8 till 7 every day, and I think the pandemic's really changed all of that. So there's we don't have the presenteeism that I think was quite rife in our industry. What it means for me individually is it means I can pick the kids up from school and drop them off, not every day, but some days I'm able to do that when I'm working from home. What I think it means for us as an organisation, for Nigel Wright, is that we definitely have a much more flexible approach to work than we had previously. Most people tend to work from home either 1, 2 or 3 days a week. But what's really important to us as an organisation is teamwork, and we need to be in the office occasionally to be able to spend time together as a team. And I think when we were all at home during the peak of the pandemic, it was hard for us to build that teamwork in the same way that we can in the office. So I think going forward we'll have a mix of that hybrid working approach, whereby we can work from home when we want, but come into the office when we need to collaborate with our colleagues. And that's probably the most important thing for us, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, again, there's a number of topics that we will dive into a bit more in a minute. So thank you very much for that. And Amma, could I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Hi everyone, how's it going? So I graduated from Newcastle very recently in 2017, and I currently work in audit at KPMG. So unlike my fellow panelists here, I started my career also very recently. I only worked in the, I guess, pre-pandemic old paradigm for a little over a year before things were turned on their head. And actually now I've been working flexibly more than I've been working unflexibly. And so I'm unable really to kind of provide any, I guess, strategy, like company strategy level insight as maybe some of my fellow panelists have. But I definitely can speak kind of from my own experience and how it's changed, how definitely, as Matthew said, that, I mean, I work in financial services, so it's very similar to, I guess, just finance in the sense that there was a very kind of like old, rigid, bespoke set structure that was kind of, that companies didn't really deviate from to work with. But now since the pandemic started, KPMG have really tried to endorse flexible working and really kind of put its workers first. I think one, KPMG being a large graduate employer trying to attract, constantly seem attractive to new graduates. It definitely, apologies. It definitely benefits them to kind of keep being attractive and competitive. And there is also this element of the companies needs to be able to trust and empower its employees to work as and when they need to, and give them that sense of responsibility. But as Bill and Sue touched upon, that, just because you can work remotely and work flexibly, there's a lot that's kind of lost in the nuance and kind of like the details of when you're working with somebody, and you can have kind of conversations outside of work, and you can kind of have these aha moments. And yeah, I'm just here, I guess, to give a more graduate perspective on the change in paradigms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. And that's really interesting. And I think that's a perspective that we were really welcome to hear, because whilst the strategic approach is really helpful to know, it's also really interesting to hear how people, their experience of it, how the delivery of that strategy, how that's affecting people. And as we've talked about previously, what the good and the bad is, and what we need to think about in the whole holistic view of flexible working. So thank you very much for that. And it's great to have you all with me tonight talking about it. I think you've all talked about what does flexible working mean for you as individuals. But can I ask you, does your sector have a specific approach for flexible working? Now, Lisa, I know you mentioned that marketing had a particular, people had a sense of marketing and their approach to working in general, but does your sector, for example, now have they picked up a common approach to flexible working?
No, absolutely not. And I guess the creative sector isn't necessarily tagged as one of the traditional sectors that might be quite rigid in its way. We're normally quite a creative, innovative sector, but for the 20 plus years I've worked in agency, it has been extremely rigid, and there was very little flexibility outside of those hours, and it was always agency based in office, never at home. And no, I really don't think there has been an industry response to this in any way. I think businesses are doing what they think they should be doing that is right for their business and their team. I don't necessarily think, particularly for the creative industry, there has to be almost a sector response or a right way for the sector. For me, when we introduced hybrid and flexible working, it was a huge consultation period that we went through with our entire team. And for me, it was about doing what was right by my team, and also what was right by our clients and our business to make all three pillars a success. It was less relevant what other creative agencies or the creative industry were doing, but I did take a lot of counsel from lots of other business leaders, not necessarily just in the creative sector, but right across the board, to really hear about the things that were working, the nuances, the issues, the troubles. And one of the things that was really insightful from that initial discussion was that complete flexibility around a hybrid model was starting to fall a little bit flat, because people were making the effort to make the commute into the workplace, but because there was no structure around it, they may be commuting and finding there's actually nobody in the office when they arrive. So that social interaction they were craving isn't necessarily there. And that was a huge focus point in terms of us deciding how we bring hybrid to life, to make sure that when people did make that effort to commute into the office, they did get that social interaction, they got that collaboration, they got that human element of working with their team again. So for us, that looked like 2 set days for the entire team in the office and 3 days complete flexibility where they could work from home, in the office, or on a beach if they fancied. So, you know, I think there's lots of shared learnings, and I think collaboration with both your team and other industries and business leaders is really important. But for us, generally, it was very much about what would work for us as a business and a team.
Thank you, Lisa. Matthew, can I ask you from the finance perspective?
Yep.
Do you see a sector approach, or again, is it like Lisa and the creative industries that it's more just down to the organisations?
I think it's down to the organisation. I mean, there's definitely some companies that haven't particularly covered themselves in glory over the course of the last year or so, with the approach that they've taken to flexible working. But I'd say by and large across the industry, you have some companies such as Schroders that have taking an approach completely different to everybody else, which is we don't expect people in the office, full stop. It's there if you want it, but they really aren't fussed. By and large, certainly from our competitors and as an industry standard, it tends to be an individual choice, an individual preference. Where I think there's the biggest shift, and where I suspect it's most relevant for the people on the call now, is with our more junior employees and people that are joining. My role at Brewin requires me to do a lot of training of the more junior members of staff. Now, the common phrase everybody will say, and I'm sure everybody's read similar sort of comments on articles discussing working from home, is that you need younger people coming in the office to be able to absorb the information from people around them and have that sort of learn by osmosis. But that doesn't work if the only people that are in the office are other trainees, because the more senior members of staff are in their nicely sized houses working from home in their nicely kitted out offices, whereas your junior members of staff, in particular my colleagues in London, have expressed this, that it's much better for them to go into the office, because for the first 6 months of the pandemic they were working off their laptop on their bed, because they're in a flat share with 4 or 5 people, and not everybody is blessed with a desk, 2 screens, and in the middle of summer, air conditioning. So I think there's an imbalance, I think, in how you're viewing working from home. And one thing that we're working really hard to try and get ahead of and rectify is how we plug that training gap, and whether that is as part of this hybrid working, mandating that people are in the office when they are in the office, that they are sat around these members of the team, so that you can learn by that learning by osmosis can happen. But I think we've certainly learned the hard way through the first lockdown that without having a plan around that, and without having an approach to deal with that problem, you end up sleepwalking forward, and you have people not realizing the full potential and not being trained effectively. I'm pleased to say I think we're ahead of that now, and we've got a good structure in place, but I think that's a lesson we've learned painfully, rather than getting ahead of it, I guess.
Thank you, Matthew. It does seem like there's a lot of organisations that are in that situation where we're all having to learn as we go, and having to test things. And I'm not sure there's ever been a scenario like this before, where something has really pushed so many companies and businesses to then go into this testing phase. And you've very kindly started to address one of the questions that we've had in. So if anyone else has any other questions, please do pop them in the Q&A chat, and we will come back to your question, Paul, as well as the other ones that we've had in advance. Can I just take this opportunity, Danica, is it possible to pop up on the screen the poll where we're asking the audience, if when you're thinking about where you work, would you rather work remotely all the time, work from the office all the time, or a mixture of both? And I'll just leave that up there for a few minutes, if you wouldn't mind answering. As I say, that's all anonymous, so no one's going to judge you for what you put, but it just helps us see what the sense is out there. That's great. So we can see that for the majority of the people who are on this call, thank you very much for answering that. The majority of you would like to take a hybrid approach, but there are some people who want to work remotely all the time, and there are others who want to be in the office all the time, which I think is addressing some of the things that Lisa and Matthew, you've just spoken about. So thank you for that. Thank you for taking part in that poll. Sue, can I ask you from a recruitment point of view, because you mentioned when you were introducing that there is a stereotypical and there was the 8 till 7, and you were saying that has changed. Is that for your company, or is that, do you think, across the sector?
Well, I guess it's hard to say. I would say it probably has changed across the sector from other people that I've spoken to. I mean, we're still doing the same amount of work ultimately, but I think we've just found other ways to be more productive. And in a way, sometimes working from home, people can be more productive. So I guess one of the things that's changed in our world is we're not out and about seeing clients all of the time. So, you know, I went to see a client yesterday afternoon down in County Durham, and it's an hour each way. So that's, you know, that's 2 hours of your day that you've lost just to traveling. And actually we've gained all of that time back because we can actually work that time now, because we rarely go and see people face to face. A lot of our clients are not taking external visitors onto site. I really miss that, because that's part of the job that I love, going out to seeing businesses, meeting new people, but a lot of that can be substituted on these types of formats now. I think the other thing is that we know that we can measure people's productivity in other ways other than them just being sat at their desk. So just because somebody's at their desk till 7 o'clock every night doesn't mean that they're going to be the top performer in the company, but we've got other ways of measuring other people's activities and ways of working. And actually some of the best performers at Nigel Wright are actually working mums who work 4 days a week. So I think that just goes to show you don't have to be working 50 hours a week to be a high performer in our organisation. In terms of across the industry as a whole, I would say, you know, couldn't say for every other recruitment organisation, but certainly from anecdotal things that I've heard, there's definitely more flexibility out there than there would have been previously.
Thank you very much. And Sue, you just mentioned then, can I ask you, so when you said you no longer are going out as much, and obviously the news tonight mean you may not be going out anywhere near as much as you were, do you think that lack of human connection, has that changed how, not your performance, but the performance of what you're trying to deliver with
it was a big concern of ours initially that we'd struggle to build relationships as well with people if we were going to be doing it over a screen. And I think at first we thought, oh, well, we're going to have to go out and see as many people as we can in person, especially if it's a new client, because we won't be able to get to know them as well in this type of format. But it hasn't been much of a blocker. The client I went to see yesterday, I would say, is probably more of a traditional organisation. It's a manufacturing business, and they, you know, the role that they're looking to hire, they will want somebody who's in the office at least 4 days a week. So I think for them, it was important that we went to the site and we went to meet them in person. Whereas other clients just wouldn't expect us to go to their site. And, you know, especially when we think about businesses that maybe work in the food and drink manufacturing sector, they definitely don't want people to come on site. So we're having to substitute it with these formats. But I think everybody's so used to this format of speaking to people these days that it just seems to work. You know, we've got candidates who go through whole interview processes where they haven't even been to the office where they're going to be working or met the person they're going to be working for in real life. And it's just accepted now by people as a way that we can do business. That said, we've still got a lot of clients that do like to see people face to face and want people to come on site, and candidates want to go and see the offices that they're working in, but it wouldn't be unusual if they didn't do that.
Thank you. That's really helpful to get that specific insight. So thank you for that. You've all touched on about different flexible and how that affects teams, individuals and things like that. And I was just wondering, how do you make teamwork effective? I know we briefly touched on it through flexible working. So Lisa, you were mentioning before that you have taken a specific approach that works for you. And then someone has mentioned that it can be quite solitary if you don't want to be a remote working person. And Bill, I just wondered if I could come to you first about your experience, because you've been across various sectors and you have done and you are continuing to do remote working. Do you have any thoughts about how teamwork can work?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really kind of solidified in my mind over the last 21, 22 months is that the whole thing around empathy. Yeah, everybody's different. Every business is different. Every employee is different and has a different set of requirements, a different set of circumstances. And I really think that whole scenario, organizations really need to think seriously about that. I don't think the one size fits all approach is right. I think it needs to be kind of quite appropriate to meet the needs of their organization, but also meet the needs of the individuals. And trying to marry that up. I mean, the employment situation, the employment relationship's always been give and take, yeah. And I think that's still the case. Flexibility just adds another dimension to that equation, I think. Teamwork, what we've tried to do in the business, as I say, we've had different locations. Even before the pandemic, we had sort of different locations and we had to work together. So we did work kind of effectively through teams anyway. But what we tried to do was build in some social elements as well. Every morning we would have a 9:30 catch-up call for a half hour, which was really focused on just really some of the, what you've been up to, what the blockers that are in your way, not really focused on the tasks, as it was things happened in the day through the kind of programs and pieces of work that we were doing, that those things would come out anyway. But it was really just trying to create that kind of emotional connection, that sense of belonging, because I think as somebody said earlier, it's so easy to feel isolated and not part of something if you're not in amongst it quite regularly. So again, I think there's a lot of emphasis on the manager as well, because managing face to face is a different ballpark, I think, to managing remotely. You can look round the room, you can look over the top of your desk, you can look out your office door, and you can gauge how people are feeling or looking, or I'll just go and talk to Samantha because she's looking a bit glum, so I'll just go and see what's up. Or, oh, John's very happy today, I wonder what's happened there. Yeah, but remotely it's much more difficult because you can't really see and gauge the situation to the same extent. So I think from a managerial perspective, the skills required are different. And again, I think there's lots need to be done to try and help managers manage in that situation and build that trust that just because someone's remote, you have to trust that they are doing the job, because there are ways you can measure that anyway. If you can't trust them, why have you employed them in the first place? I think, as Matthew said.
Thank you, Bill. And Anna, can I ask you from your perspective? Obviously, you said you're pretty much all remote working now. And how do you feel as a member of a team? How do you feel that cohesion has been developed, if it has?
I say Microsoft Teams is integral and very helpful. It's weird, like it's closed a lot of doors and it's opened a lot of doors. As Bill said, the feeling of kind of isolation is very real. I did feel prior to the pandemic that I was a member of the company, and I'd only been working there for a year, but yeah, there was really, like, I was going into the office, I was seeing my team, and that really does go a long way in kind of like having the sense of solidarity and having the sense of working together. And then now working remotely, initially I kind of saw it as a blessing, and I still do. Like, you can't beat the convenience. I saw it as a blessing because I generally I prefer to work to my own kind of schedule. And that's definitely kind of an objective benefit, but not having, again, being a relatively new member of the firm, not having a manager who's there in my present area to actually like kind of identify, because when you're a member of staff, sometimes you don't even know kind of when you're underperforming or when you're not doing something right. Having a more experienced member of staff around to be able to gauge and see you do that really definitely can help. And that definitely has been a challenge, because whenever I need help, I need to reach out to my manager. But it's interesting because I work across various teams in KPMG, and each different manager kind of has their own approach to how they deal with it. I think the most successful approaches have been the managers who try to create kind of like at the beginning, at the end of the day, they have kind of like, instead of team meetings, they just, instead of like kind of like work meetings, they're just kind of like social kind of calls, for everyone to touch base and talk. And they try to, I think going forward in January, we're going to start implementing, I think, hours where people have to be in. in the middle of the day from between about 11 to 1. So I think people can work flexibly, but if they can be in the office around those days to kind of meet and address the need of people just actually being together and working together and developing that chemistry so that they can deliver the project properly. Also, I think because I work in audit, which is a sector which is under intense scrutiny and just regulation just inherently because of its function. And I think there's a push while KPMG as a whole are trying to be more adopt more hybrid working strategies. With audit, I think they're trying to be less hybrid because I think having teams away from each other too far does undermine audit quality, which I've kind of seen and perceived. So it's interesting kind of like, I guess, balancing that, like catering to people's want for kind of like hybrid working and having more independence over their structures, but also being like, look, we need to prioritize, the quality of the work.
Thank you, Emma. That's really interesting. And it brings me to one of the questions. Can there be too much flexibility? Lisa, there was a very quick nod there, so I'm going to go straight to you for that.
Yeah, I think there can be too much flexibility. And maybe this applies more to smaller businesses than it does larger businesses. But I think, for just general being able to contact people is very difficult if flexibility is right across the board. Even as a small team, we're finding challenges around opening truly flexible hours where, for example, I might leave at 2:30 to go and pick the kids up, and I might log back on at 7 to do a couple of hours at the night time, which works great for me. But I then don't want to be sending emails and tasks and things communicating around work to my colleagues who might have finished work at 3 p.m. that day and aren't logging back on. And the challenges around those communication channels and how we manage them personally and also how we manage them as a business. So I think, and the point I guess I made before around, those people wanting to commute into an office to have that social interaction, whereas if it's completely flexible, you could turn up to an office where there's absolutely nobody there and, you might as well stay at home. So I guess my opinion on that is yes, there possibly could be too much flexibility. I think this is also very new for so many of us that we're all finding our way. And I don't think there's anybody out there who would categorically say they've nailed it hands down. I think we have to be very open-minded about the future of working life and how that can impact us as business leaders, how it can impact us as employees, and how it can impact us personally. And I think we have to be willing to try and to get feedback and adjust accordingly to make sure that it's working for us personally in the business. But I think it's new territory, so I think we have to be willing to learn and hold our hands up when we make mistakes and things don't work out, but adapt new ideas and adopt them to make sure we improve.
Thank you, Lisa. And Matthew, you're nodding there.
I think a huge part of it is culture, right? If you've got a transparent and open culture with clear communication, then I think not to say there wouldn't be too much such a thing as too much flexibility, but the likelihood across every workplace of having that perfect mix of good culture, good communication, a good accountability and robust processes is frankly slim to none, because humans are fallible beings. We've, as best as we can, we set clear expectations at the start of the day. Everybody knows exactly what they're doing. Everybody knows exactly what the colleagues are doing, so they won't cross swords on particular issues or dealing with particular queries. And we try and keep that. That's the one feature from the start of the pandemic, whether we're in the office or out the office, is our 9 a.m. morning call just to set the agenda for the day. And it's not laborious. It's not 30 minutes of soul destroying mundanity. In some cases it can be 5 minutes. It's here's what's on the deck. That's going to you, Laura. That's going to you, Jack. That's going to you, Kate. Or that's your sphere of influence for the day. Let me know if you have any issues. Sweet, bye. And that's all it needs to be. Clearly there are some deliverables. I imagine, for us, it ends up being something. It's quite trackable, traceable, but we've not yet been required to hit anybody over the head with the figures, put it that way. But if it's a marketing campaign with a specific deadline, and objectively you know that you're behind on that, I can see from Lisa's perspective how that there is very much such a thing as too much flexibility there. We have choke points in the year that we are always busy, and we know we are, and we've all agreed as a team that, regulations notwithstanding, we'll be in the office as much as we possibly can at that period, because we know that when your nose needs to be at the grindstone, you can't be wondering whether or not I can get a hold of Laura because she's off to the supermarket to do a shop at 3 p.m. because that sort of flexibility is given for the other 11 months of the year where we don't have a choke point. But for that particular month, we've all collectively agreed that, you know, you put on your armor and go to battle. And after that month, you know, we can go back to the flexibility. So I guess it's contextual as well. But the one thing that I could see emanating from Lisa was that they've got a good workplace culture, and that, I think, is the foundation upon which any of this rests on. Because I do know colleagues at not necessarily in my sector, but certainly friends of mine that are working in, you know, micromanaged workplaces, and in that type of environment with that type of manager, it ain't gonna fly. And I won't jump into the Q&A because we've obviously got a Q&A section later on, but there's some of the questions that have come through. I would link into that, but we'll address them later.
Thank you. Can I ask, with that, leading on very nicely, more about the individual? If an individual is looking to have more flexibility in the role, do you have any advice on how they can ask or lobby their manager for particular flexibility in their post, either at interview if they're applying for the role, or if they're already in the post? Sue, can I go to you?
It's a hard one, isn't it? And I think it probably comes down again to the company's approach to flexible working, and then what the candidate's expectations are as well. So, you know, if somebody wants a degree of flexibility where they can work from home a day or two a week, then, you know, I guess if that fits in with the business requirements, then that's okay. I mean, we have had times where an offer, so we have an offer for a candidate, for example, and part of their negotiation tool is to say, you know, I'm happy to take the salary that's on offer, but I want to be able to work from home 2 days a week. We would present that to the client. Now, clients don't necessarily always like putting those things down in writing, so whether it will be contractually agreed is a different matter. I think if you're already in a role within a business and you want to negotiate flexible working, I think it's putting a trial period in and proving that you can do it, and having that trusting relationship with your manager to be able to address any issues as and when they arise, really. But I think if you can do it and you can prove you can do it and you can be as effective in your role, then I would just recommend putting a trial period in to see if it works.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you for that advice. And that's nicely Danica, is it possible to have the next poll up? And this is where we're asking attendees, do you think a company should put their approach to flexible working in their job adverts? So do you think they should all the time, sometimes, depending on the context, as Matthew's mentioned, or not at all? We'll give a few more seconds for that.
So we're very much going net zero 2050, so our lights keep turning off. So I keep having to slide off of screen to get the sensors back on.
I was wondering, Matthew, if that was someone signaling to you that you've clocked your hours now, you need to go home.
No, it's just my performative webinar style, just sliding in and out of frame.
Well, thank you very much for filling in that poll. We can see there that actually there's a mix that people think that a large proportion think that they should include it all of the time, and then some people say sometimes, but there is definitely a steer there that they should be included at some point, which is interesting because I'm not sure all companies do at the moment. So thank you very much for completing that poll. That's really helpful insight. I think we've got lots more topics to discuss, but I think we've got lots of questions that have come in, so we're going to go straight to the Q&A. So I'm just going to have a quick. So the question from Paul is, what advice do you have for new starters joining a company as a mainly remote worker? And then on the flip side, what advice do you have for companies welcoming new starters who mainly work online? So Amma, can I ask you to go with the flip side first and ask what advice do you have for companies who have, I know you weren't a new starter when your complete remote started, but yeah, what advice you have?
For companies looking to bring on new graduates, well, I'd say that I think now we live in a new paradigm where flexible working has become kind of like ubiquitous in the norm. So it's definitely something that needs to be addressed and catered to. I think we're also living like the generations now coming into work. We have different, I think we generally have different priorities. It's less about, I guess, kind of just offering kind of attractive salaries and kind of like basically just companies that can offer better work-life balance, because I don't know many people who want to spend all their time kind of like working and I guess selling a large part of their lives just to work for this company. So any company really, from my perspective, that can really honestly kind of show that it wants to do, it appreciates that it's not just a one-way street, one-way relationship. It's a give-take relationship between employee and employer, and having an employer that kind of like I can really see that respects that I am a person, that I have kind of like needs and a life outside of work, and also will and kind of will allow me flexibility in that respect. And companies also that again seem to have a more, I guess attractive is a very loose term, but an attractive kind of like a culture that isn't just oriented about just, going into the office and just getting in the hours and getting the work done, but something that kind of like is just more human, would be, I guess, my advice from my perspective. I don't know if that's answered the question or.
Yes, thank you very much. That's really helpful advice. And Lisa, you were nodding there. Can I ask from the other perspective? So Paul's question of what advice do you have for new starters joining a company as a mainly remote worker? What could you give?
Yeah, so we have we employed 2 people through the pandemic remotely, and we've since recruited 4 additional through the hybrid working model. So again, it's been new territory, Paul, in terms of how we onboard people, particularly when we were fully remote. I guess we have followed our normal induction process, but made it as accessible as possible through online channels. So we made sure that the entire team was visible. We do quite a strict induction plan on the first day, which is very much about getting to know the team rather than getting to know the business. So we make sure new starters spend time with each one of our team members, having a coffee, and it's far less about what they do at work, and it's much more about how they like to work, what things really, excite them, what things they struggle with, how they like to be communicated with, what they do outside of work. And that type of human connection embeds new starters for us much quicker than inducting them on the business and our clients and our processes and what we do. So we tried to elevate that as much as we could through remote working, and have carried that on through our hybrid induction process as well. And I think it's, for me, particularly in a small team, it's very much about making somebody feel part of the family as quickly as possible. Everything else can be learned and taught over time, but you need to make that new starter feel like they are supported, that they're encouraged, that this team has got their back, and that they can ask anything to anyone at any time. There's no such thing as a stupid question. So we try to take the formality around the business induction out, but keep formality around the human connections, the team connections. And we've found that's worked particularly well in terms of just our team who have been very early starters, saying, they feel like they're in such a supportive team. They love who they're working with. They already feel like they've built up really strong relationships, and anything that comes after that in terms of progression around the role or questions that they need to ask has been much easier to deal with because they feel like they're in a supportive environment. So that's been kind of the forefront of our focus when we've been inducting new starters.
Thank you, Lisa. That's really helpful. I'm aware we've got loads of questions to get through, so I'm going to jump to Catherine's question, which is, what has been your experience of ensuring that those who work flexibly, for example, part-time, job share, flexible hours have equal opportunity to leadership and career advancement. Now, that has been a concern that I've seen a number of times. So, Sue, can I go to you for this?
Good question, actually. I think, and just thinking about it from Nigel Wright's perspective, I think we benefit from the fact that we've got quite a structured career framework in place. So in our organisation, I would like to think that everybody who works for Nigel Wright knows where they're at on their development programmes, and we've got different career frameworks depending on what grade you're on within the organisation. So, you know, working from home shouldn't hinder your career from that perspective, because you know where you need to get to and what the next stage, how you're going to get to that next stage. But I think if you were 100% remote based working in our business in a consultant facing role, I think you probably would miss out on some of those development opportunities that we talked about earlier, but more from learning from your colleagues, being around your team, other team members. That said, in our support functions, we have got a couple of colleagues who've chosen to just be 100% remote based recently. So it'll be interesting to see how things are impacted there. I think it will come down to organisations having good structured development programmes in place and making sure that they are used and people aren't forgotten about when they are at home, and making sure that, you know, they're fully integrated in part of the team. I would say in terms of new starters, when we've had new starters who've joined Nigel Wright, it is important that people, you know, the onus is partly on them, isn't it, to network as well. So trying to enable those networks with other peer groups within the organisation maybe helps just build confidence and build networks. And another thing that's worked well for our organisation as well is having a more formal mentor process in place. So things like that. Yeah, I think that would be one of the couple of the suggestions that I would have.
Thank you, Sue. Matthew, you have something.
From I think there's a certain amount as well. You know, if you're the candidate yourself that's, you know, going for these promotions, going for, you know, leadership roles, I think there's an onus that's on the business itself to make sure that that you are, well, first of all, from a line manager perspective, you know, in my role, I line manage three individuals here at Brewin, and a big part of setting their objectives and, you know, going through annual appraisals, everything like that, is really making sure that they have the opportunity to be exposed to aspects of the job that they want to be exposed to, and some display natural leadership qualities, some don't, and it's fostering the opportunities to stretch those muscles really, and that doesn't have to be in person. It's, you know, leading and managing are two very different things, and I don't think you need to be in person to do either of them. But taking it one step back to the bigger institutional level, I think one thing I was reading a statistic a while back was that there is a perception amongst businesses that people are being penalised from working from home when applying for leadership roles, and in particular, women are at the sharp end of that wedge. And there's a gender dimension to this. And I think as business leaders, I'm not counting myself in that category, but as business leaders, it's very important to check the biases that you're applying when making decisions about who you put in positions of leadership and whether they are the candidate for the role, the best candidate for the role. Because if your entire structure up until that point has been based on a culture of presenteeism, then clearly the criteria you're looking for in your mind is, are they there? Have they been there? Have they put the hours in? You don't see the effort that the other people are putting in a more flexible arrangement because you obviously aren't there. But it's making sure that there are processes so that feedback about those members of staff from their line managers, everything like that gets fed into that process. And again, you know, if it pulls back down to that one word, culture, you've got to have the right culture in place.
And just one tiny little point on that as well, Lucy, the advice for people on the webinar, just don't be afraid when you're in interview stage or annual review stage to be really clear to your leader or your boss or your line manager about what is my progression plan here? What do I need to do in order to progress to the next role? And don't be afraid to ask that question, to challenge that information. Look for companies who are going to be clear about your progression route and just understand your expectations, as Matthew said, about what do I need to do in order to get to this next level. And if that's well handled by the business, there should be absolutely no reason that you can't put a business case forward to evidence your impact against those KPIs or that progression plan, to really challenge that. So, you know, just don't be afraid to speak up on that and ask the question.
Really helpful advice. Thank you very much. I'm going to try and squeeze 2 more questions in. This one is just, please unmute yourself if you have had this experience. Chris is interested to see if anyone's had to tackle the issue of an underperforming employee whilst they've been working remotely. Has anyone been on that unfortunate situation? Lisa has. Okay, Lisa.
Yes, I have. And Chris, it was tough. I'm not going to lie. It was really tricky. Underperformance is difficult to manage at the best of times, and to get it right and to get it right well. Through a remote situation, it was far more difficult. What I would say is that underperformance has been far more visible through remote working. You can't hide from underperformance via remote working. I think it's for us, particularly the small team, it's been far more visible. Again, it's been very much about processes and following those correct processes to make sure you understand the reason for underperformance and to make sure that you are addressing additional support, additional training, additional needs, wherever that might be. And that might not always be skills-based. It might well be emotional needs, behavioral needs, it might be soft skills, it might be confidence working remotely. So it's really making sure that there aren't presumptions made on behalf of the business and that you're really understanding why that person is underperforming, and then coaching those skills, whether it be work related or whether it would be personally related. But you know, we spent a 6-month period coaching, which was probably too long in hindsight. We wouldn't have spent that amount of time coaching if we hadn't seen some improvements when we'd been office based. And it was more difficult to make the decision in the end to have to terminate that person than it probably was had we been in the office. But it was the right decision for the business because we offered all of the support and above in terms of what we offered that person to get them back to the standard they should have been. And unfortunately, they just didn't engage with it. They didn't want to do it. So we did have to terminate on that basis. But I think for me, it's about understanding that underperformance isn't always just relating to the job, particularly through the last 20 months. It could be for lots of other reasons, and doing everything possible as a business to address those as well.
Matthew, did you unmute yourself?
Yeah, it was just to build on that point and say we had a similar situation, only harking back to the point I made earlier on. It was a training gap. We've taken people on prior to the start of the pandemic, you know, junior members of staff that just frankly weren't able to be trained in the similar manner that you would normally. So when you're seeing natural gaps and slowdown in people's work rate, and you pull them up on it, and it goes back to the point I think a few people have made, in particular Lisa, about just being very honest with the line management. So look, if you don't know how to do something, make that clear, because it is much better in the short run to identify a training need and fill it than it is to assume that the people that you're working with or that are reporting into you know exactly what they're doing, when in actual fact it's like a swan, the calm and serene on the top but going crackers underneath. And we filled that training gap, pulled this individual aside and was saying, look, what can we do to help? And he laid it all out saying, look, I just don't know what I'm doing. I'm still lost in the systems. And because no one sat him down as you would in the office and said, oh, how are you getting on? You know, James. You know, no one's having that conversation, because unless, in particular, when our life is condensed into 10-minute Teams calls, there's only so much you can fit in it, and you would fit more into the stand around the coffee machine or the water cooler or whatever. You know, whatever the case is now, but you kind of got to find your own way to do that. And I guess again, from our perspective as you know, leaders of teams, part of that is creating that open culture, but it's also being emotionally in tune with your team and being reaching out rather than expecting to have back. It's, you know, probing people and saying, look, are you okay? Do you have everything that you need? But shy Ben's getting out. If you are the person that's at the other end of that and you feel like you aren't getting the requisite training, you feel like you still have no idea how to get things done, there's unless you have a really switched on team, there's not going to be someone coming around and going, okay, John, do you have everything you need to get the job done? Do you have everything you need to deal with the day-to-day? Lights gone off again. So I would just say be forthright.
Yeah.
People want to get the best out of you.
Thank you, Matthew. And Bill, I think you unmuted yourself very quickly.
Yeah, I just think, I said earlier about empathy. I think Lisa's absolutely right about managing performance. It's easier to see probably remotely, but I think as well, just having an understanding of somebody's circumstance is so important. Again, just understanding the environment they're in and all the factors around that we sometimes forget about when somebody's in an office. And again, from an employee perspective, I think some empathy with the challenges the business is facing as well. It's a two-way street, I think, and I think that empathy piece is really important both ways.
Thank you very much. Right, I know we've overrun, but I think this last question is really important and would be really helpful to everyone. So I will wrap this up just after this question. But Carl has asked, he's just recently changed role to be 100% at home. What would be the one thing, so if I can ask everyone for one thing that you would each advise him to think about or to do to help either with his productivity, we've got to keep it short, unfortunately, or his personal health. And we haven't touched on the personal health of flexible working too much. But yeah, if I could just ask you all for one thing, and Bill, I'm going to start with you.
I think just try and connect socially with the people you're working with. I think that's the main thing. Just fosters that sense of belonging, and I think that's so important when you're in an environment or in an organisation for the first time, particularly working remotely.
Thank you, Emma. What's your one piece of advice?
I'd say and I understand that various people have limitations based on their living situation, but really try your best to, I guess, distinguish work from home within your house. I think having that separation really does help, because it can, I don't know, in my own personal experience, I feel like if you really integrate your living space with where you work, work just becomes this kind of all-encompassing, pervasive kind of thing. So if you kind of create these these distinct boundaries between them, can help. One thing that my mother actually recommended to me to do was, imagine if you're working from home, imagine actually just kind of that you're going to work. So get out, change your clothes, and actually leave the door, walk around the block, and then come back to your house as if you're entering the office. That kind of changes your state of mind that you're going into work. And I think that definitely has helped with my productivity.
Thank you very much. Some really good practical advice there. Sue, can I go to you?
I think that's a great one, actually. I think, replace the commute with going out for a walk on the morning, even if you don't have to go anywhere. I think it's great just to get your blood pumping. Yeah. I would say just make sure you've got a really good structure in place for your day and have an organised plan of what you need to do. Because, I think sometimes when you're at home, you maybe can't be as focused as you might be in the office. And then when you are finished, switch your laptop off and put it away, because it can sometimes kind of wave at you from the corner of the room just for one last email to send. Sorry, I've squeezed a couple in there.
No, thank you very much. Matthew, you laughed at that point, so I'm going to go to you next.
Yeah. My one bit of advice that saved me through the first pandemic was exercise. Make it a part of your routine. Don't care what it is, how it is. For me, it was running. If it's a bike ride for you, if it's Pilates, yoga, whatever, just make it a non-negotiable part of your routine, because it's so easy for it to disappear, especially if like some of the members of the panel, you have kids that'll hoover up more of that time than you have to spend. So where you can, get that habit ingrained, because it makes a huge difference to your mental health.
Thank you very much. And Lisa?
Yeah, I would completely agree. Those points are so important, and the replace the commute is a great one. But just something slightly different is just don't feel like you have to always be sat at your desk when you're doing work stuff. If you've got a phone call to make, getting out and going for a walk while you make the phone call is good. If you've got a chat with somebody, go and make a coffee while you're having, for me, don't feel like you've got to be sat at your desk still in front of a laptop for 7.5 hours a day, because you just wouldn't do that in the office. And I think Zoom calls constantly, emails constantly is where burnout can happen. So be creative with how you do your workday tasks at home as well.
Thank you all very much for that. They were all really helpful pieces of advice, and several that I'm definitely going to be doing myself. I'm really sorry to those of you who we haven't managed to answer the questions, or I haven't been able to ask the questions of. I will speak to the panel afterwards to get their responses to your questions, and I will get in touch with you to let you know their thoughts on your questions, because they've all been fantastic questions tonight. So thank you very much. Do keep in touch with us. Do stay connected. We have more events coming up. So Newcastle Develop, the next event is on workplace culture and inclusivity, and that's taking place in January in 2022. Obviously, it's the last Wednesday of the month, so do join us for that, because it's going to be another very interesting conversation. And you can also get your questions in advance or ask them on the night. That QR code will take you to the web page where you can register and book your place there. So thank you very much for that. There will be a poll just pops up at the end, just so we can get some instant feedback from you just now, just to find out your thoughts on the event. So please do fill that in for us. We would really appreciate it. And please can I take this moment to thank Danica for her support, doing all things technical, because otherwise we would have been in trouble if it was down to me. And thank you very much to the panel for giving up their time and their knowledge and their experience, because I personally have found it fascinating. And with the number of questions that we've had come in, I know that you guys seem to also found it very, very interesting. So thank you all very much. We really appreciate it. Do look forward to having you join us at the next Newcastle Develop. Hope you all stay safe and have a lovely rest of your evening. Thank you very much.